Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Excalibur Roundtable Tech Talk. I am Mike Fuson. We're continuing our extended Tech Talk series with our friends at HaloITSM. I have with me Tom Petley from Halo. Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Mike. Great to be here.
It's always a pleasure. We always get to deep dive into some of the fun that is Halo. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about vendor management. As we've done some of our previous sessions, we've talked about CMDB, we've talked about all of our different process areas. One of the things that you've said to me multiple times is we really need to talk about vendor management, because vendor management starts to pull a lot of these pieces together and ties different things to things in different ways, and gives us the ability to really manage. And when you start to look at the CMDB, start to manage those items as to what vendors are involved, or even when you have vendors involved in things like incidents and service requests and other things, because as so many companies have today, they have third-party partners that are involved in different aspects of delivering services to the business. So we've got to talk about vendor management. So I want to turn it over to you, and let's do a little bit of a dive into vendor management and the cool stuff that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share my screen now. Yeah, as you say, I'm quite keen on I'm always quite keen on pushing vendor management as a process that people should put in from day one, really. I think it's something that is often overlooked, but there's a few really quick wins that you can get there, which basically help you to kind of centralize everything into one tool. Because often you find if you haven't implemented it in your ITSM tool, people emailing from Outlook, they're contacting vendors from there. There's always questions around, has someone contacted the vendor here, and what's the status of this, and all those kind of questions that if you implement it within the ITSM tool, it kind of takes away those steps and it brings it all into one place. It gives you an audit trail as well. Let me just get into a few areas I wanted to show today. So Halo has a vendors area, and this is kind of a high, to get a high level, it's a contact list, it's an address book of all your vendors. And if I just go into the Halo ITSM vendor, you'll see here, if we just scroll down here, we have all the core information. We've got contact details, and in this area, you'd put the support contact details, really. That's the people that you'd raise an incident or request in from the vendor. If you scroll down, there's also portal information as well, and you can have all that set in the system as well, so you can connect onto portals and things. I'm going to skip over tickets, and I'll come back to that in a second. This other tab here is your contacts, and that's where you might store your procurement contacts and additional contacts at the vendor. Something that's really useful to track in the tool, you might have other places where you do manage this, and it's not something that's essential, but it's a good place if you want to manage the contracts that we have with your vendor as well. So kind of managing renewal dates, and also any assets that are covered under that. So I often use an example of maybe an HP vendor. You might have a contract to manage all your printers, and under here you can manage all the printers that are covered under that vendor contract. And then just going on to the final tab here, sorry, actually the settings one. You can manage any email templates if you do raise it with the vendor via email. Maybe you need it in a specific format. And then at the bottom here is your SLAs as well, so we can actually manage our vendor SLAs as well. So it does come to contract renewals. You've got details around all the SLAs that they're meeting or not meeting. I was going to step back into an incident and just show you a bit about how that can kind of tie in the vendor module with incident management or request management. So I've just got an example incident here. And from within here, we have a button here just to log to vendor. I'll just click into this. You'll see here that we have an option of, we can email the vendor, or we can have it set up so you don't have to email. It's just a way of going via the portal or just tracking it in Halo. From here, you might type an email. It might be a pre-populated email with variables from the incident or the request. I'm just going to change this over to my email address, just to add it in there. We would then choose our vendor. And this is actually pre-populated because the asset against this particular incident, it's just a workstation in this case, the asset against there is is associated with a contract under that vendor. So the system already knows who the vendor is. You can change it, can have other vendors in here. Once we then log that out to our vendor, it's going to send that email, that pre-populated email. This would typically raise a ticket in the other system, and then we'd normally get some kind of acknowledgement email which would populate this vendor reference number from that acknowledgement. And you'll see here that we've then created that link between this incident and that vendor. So at any point in time, we can go into this record here, and we can see under the tickets tab here, we can see any open tickets that we have with vendor at the moment. And this will give us a history of all those incidents or requests that are outstanding. You've got one place to go to and you can see everything. It's just a really neat way of just tying it all together, and it just creates that single kind of pane of everything in one place. Then just additionally on that, you can also then create separate email threads. So you can have one conversation with the vendor, and then you can have a second conversation with your end user. So you're not kind of overlapping if you don't want to. And under this little speech bubble, you can see that there's a different vendor tab, and that gives you a filtered view of that vendor conversation. So it's one really neat way of tying it all together. And the other way I just wanted to highlight is that when you're with your vendor and you do associate an asset, we can go into our asset at any point and we can see that link from there as well. So under the asset itself, or the CI, if it is a CI managed by a vendor, we just have a tab here, and we can see all that information from here as well. So you can see it from the other perspective if you are kind of approaching it from an asset side rather than an incident or request. And then from within here, you can then obviously track your key information on there. So Mike, that's just a very, very high level that I just wanted to really just highlight some really key quick wins that people can get by introducing a vendor management kind of process into their ITSM tool.
Well, and this really takes it a step further too, because as we see with a lot of customers, they are looking to be able to track, SLAs that are for the vendor versus an internal SLA, track, things that have been handed off to a vendor, because for many things they may have an MSP or a vendor that's handling certain aspects of services, or for some of our customers, it could be larger numbers of items that are sent out to a vendor. So this starts to be able to tie all of this together, and of course this all rolls up now to reporting engines where if you have vendor agreements and they have to meet certain SLAs, you have the ability to track on your side how much they met the SLA, and they may be providing you reporting in a quarterly business review of how they feel they did against the SLAs. And so you have the ability to track all of that information somewhat independently. And as you stated, being able to send that out to the vendor, you get a reference ID back potentially from their tracking system, or they may be managing it in here. You've got different ways that this can be approached to manage that vendor interaction with you. We had an interesting conversation with the customer recently where they have certain vendors that, say, a telecom vendor that deals with some of their lines, they don't always have control over when that vendor is, for example, going to be doing certain maintenance on things. You get a big telco company, they tell you when they're doing maintenance, not the other way around in a lot of cases. And the ability to track when that's happening so they know when there's going to be impacts is somewhat difficult. And being able to tie all this information together within Halo makes that tracking a little bit easier because this is already a concept, already something that's central to the Halo ITSM platform to be able to drive and track vendor activity. So I think that's really, really cool because it gives you that larger picture. Again, one of the challenges we're always faced as organizations is, do we have a full picture into everything that's going on and who's doing it, who's responsible? And that makes it a little bit easier, especially from a management perspective. I don't want to beat on my team that for something that a vendor that they're waiting on a vendor to complete a piece for in order to deliver a particular service or solve an incident restore service. We're waiting on a vendor to do their piece of it. So it makes it kind of nice to have it as a full view into all of the activity and the responsible parties for that. So it's pretty exciting. And of course, we're looking at out of the box capabilities, and we can take this other directions with the workflow engine and our ability to make changes to the system to have this work the way we need it to work as an organization. It's one of the great things about Halos. A lot of these things were thought about, so we start with a good out of the box experience, but then the ability to adapt that to suit our process needs and our process requirements. As always, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit of additional insight into the features and the power of HaloITSM. I look forward to our next interaction.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.